Hello everyone, Lori McKenzie, Christian mental health therapist, back, and I actually did a video discussing a few psychological defense mechanisms that are illustrated extremely early in scripture. In the first few pages in Genesis 3, took place with Adam and Eve, and I did a video showing all of them, and something happened when I put it on YouTube. I was surprised to see that it ended up being exactly 3 minutes, which counted as a short. And somehow I cut off part of it and it turned into a short. I think I must have done something that made the YouTube think that I wanted it to be a short, so it got cut off. It was interesting though, it got cut off right at the end of the first of the few that I was going to mention. So I'm going to just do a few short videos. I don't know if they're going to be under 3 minutes, but I think if I cover less until I get used to doing this, I won't lose my work like I did. I was very frustrated, but maybe God allowed it for some reason. But the first one I discussed, so defense mechanisms, just to review, I'll put a link below for the first one. I'm trying to show how there's psychological concepts that have been coined in our modern day, but that are evidenced based on how God made us and his image and the world being fallen, how they're demonstrated in scripture. And gosh, there's a whole bunch that are shown real early on, after Adam and Eve disobey God. And that's basically what defense mechanisms are. We defend against shame, and obviously they felt shame because they did wrong, and they did really, really wrong, which, I could get into the difference between shame and guilt, but that'll be another video. But anyhow, so we all do these. The more aware we are, the less likely we are to use them, to overuse them, or at least to recognize if we're using them a lot, that maybe there's some areas of our life we need to work on. Maybe there's some sin habits, or, what's going on here? Ought I feel some shame? Because there is healthy shame. It tells us we're not God. Or am I living in a way where shame keeps coming up, which means I probably need to get right with God. So we have the story of Adam and Eve early in Genesis. We know what happens. Eve was tempted. Satan had the enemy had his input, and she decided to eat, and then she gave to her husband and he ate. So there's lots of joking that goes on in Christian circles about, oh, it was Eve's fault, oh, Adam wasn't leading. They both sinned, and we would have if it had been us. So they both disobeyed God, and they both had their temptation that probably has followed us on through life, that we need to surrender to God. So anyhow, they both sinned. And then here we have in chapter 3 of Genesis, verse 8, and they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. So the first video that I have below talks about denial / avoidance, which is what's going on here. It's probably not outright denial, because outright denial, we convince ourselves that something's not a problem. They knew, but they were trying to hide it from God. They were trying to avoid responsibility, and they were hiding sort of physically their anatomy, but also just their face from him, from the shame. So what's interesting though is that there's another defense mechanism in here. So that's what I started. That first video really pretty much covered that, the avoidance / denial. And there's another defense mechanism in here called reaction formation. Reaction formation is when we choose a reaction that exaggerates the opposite of what actually is happening. Kind of a basic, simple example of this would be being super friendly and kind to someone that we maybe dislike or don't get along with. That can be sort of functional in a way, I guess, but It's like acting the opposite way of how we feel or what the situation would typically warrant. So that's a reaction formation in a way. They're covering up and hiding and acting as if they're not naked, acting as if they don't know what they know, acting as if something hasn't gone wrong. And we know that that doesn't work with the Lord, and they probably knew it too. So the covering itself is, in a sense, a reaction formation. They are no longer naked and unashamed. They feel the shame, and they're trying to hide the shame. The next one I would like to talk about, I'm going to do in the next video, just so I don't screw things up. Hopefully I won't. This is almost 6 minutes long. But we're going to talk about 2 more. So stay tuned. Bye-bye.